The air hung heavy with anticipation as dark clouds gathered ominously over the small riverside village. The sun, once a beacon of warmth, now hid behind a dense shroud of gray, casting an eerie gloom across the landscape. A sharp breeze carried, the earthy scent of damp soil, mingling with the unmistakable tang of an impending storm. The river, which had flowed calmly for weeks, now churned angrily, its waters lapping hungrily at the eroded banks with each gust of wind. Amid this brewing chaos, a determined stray dog named Luna moved swiftly through the tall grass lining the river's edge. Her coat, once a golden brown, was now streaked with mud and weathered by years of hardship. Her body bore the marks of survival, a patchy pelt, and ribs that pressed too close to her skin, but her eyes gleamed with the sharpness of a survivor's instincts. Luna was no stranger to adversity. She had endured abandonment, hunger, and countless dangers, but nothing had prepared her for the challenge that lay ahead. Luna paused abruptly, her ears twitching toward the distant rumble of thunder rolling over the hills. She glanced back at her small den, nestled beneath a cluster of rocks precariously close to the river. Inside, 4 tiny puppies huddled together, their soft whimpers barely audible over the rising roar of the wind and water. For weeks the den had served as their sanctuary, shielding them from predators and the elements, but as the storm intensified, Luna knew their fragile refuge was now under imminent threat. The first icy drops of rain splattered across Luna's nose, causing her to flinch. Shaking off the chill, she trotted back to the den with urgency in her steps. Inside, her puppies greeted her with high-pitched yips and tiny wagging tails. Blissfully unaware of the danger closing in, they nuzzled against her, seeking warmth and comfort. Luna licked each of their damp faces in reassurance, but her mind raced with worry. The ground beneath her paws vibrated faintly, a forewarning of the river's growing strength as it surged closer to their shelter. In the distance, the village sprang into action. Farmers shouted commands as they herded livestock to higher ground, and children clung tightly to their parents amidst the chaos. Yet, no one noticed the stray dog and her vulnerable litter by the riverbank. To the villagers, Luna was just another, forgotten creature, invisible amidst the unfolding storm. But Luna was far from ordinary. She was a mother, and a fighter. The rain intensified, transforming into a steady, relentless downpour. The river, swollen and furious, began to spill over its banks, sending rivulets of water creeping dangerously close to the den's entrance. Luna's sharp eyes scanned the area for a safe escape route, but the terrain had turned treacherous, slick, with mud and choked by rising water. Every path seemed fraught with danger. Despite the overwhelming odds, Luna would not falter. Her puppies, barely old enough to open their eyes fully, depended on her for survival. Driven by an unyielding maternal instinct, she stepped into the storm. Her body was low and tense, every muscle primed for the battle ahead. She moved carefully, each step a calculated effort against the slippery ground. The storm may have been merciless, but so was her resolve. No flood, no storm, no force of nature could break the bond she shared with her puppies. Luna knew one thing. With absolute certainty, she would fight to the end to protect her family. The odds were against her, but Luna had faced worse. And as she braced herself against the fury of the elements, she prepared to do whatever it took to ensure her puppies' survival. The early morning breeze whispered through the underbrush, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and impending rain. Luna moved quietly, her steps deliberate and calculated, guided by instincts honed through years of survival. Sunlight broke through the dense canopy and dappled patches, highlighting streaks of gold in her otherwise muddied coat. Her sharp ears twitched toward the distant hum of the village stirring to life. Hunger clawed at her stomach, but Luna ignored it. Her focus was fixed on the fragile lives waiting for her back at the den. Luna was no ordinary stray dog. Once a beloved companion, she had been left behind when her owner moved away, abandoned to fend for herself on the outskirts of the village. In the beginning, she lingered near her old home, waiting for the familiar rumble of a car or the comforting, scent of her human. But days turned into weeks and the reality of her solitude weighed heavily on her. Hunger and hardship became her constant companions, shaping her into the survivor she was today. Despite the pain of abandonment, Luna's spirit had not been completely broken. She learned to navigate the rhythms of the village, scavenging for scraps near the market and avoiding the harsh glares of indifferent passers-by. Over time, she memorized its nuances. When the market opened, where a kind farmer might leave scraps, and which paths were safest to tread. Luna's resilience kept her alive, but it was her discovery of 4 abandoned puppies that gave her a new purpose. One quiet night during her search for food, Luna stumbled upon them. 4 tiny, shivering bundles of fur nestled in a discarded cardboard box behind a closed shop. Their weak cries pierced the stillness, tugging at something deep within her. At first she hesitated, unsure if their mother might return. But their frail bodies and desperate whimpers told her the truth. They had been abandoned just as she once was. One by one she carried them to a small den she had dug near the riverbank, a secluded refuge where she believed they would be safe from harm. The puppies transformed Luna's world. Her days, once consumed by her own survival, now revolved around their fragile lives. She hunted tirelessly, often sacrificing her own meals to ensure they were fed. Their playful yips and tiny, trusting licks became her source of strength, soothing the ache of her weary body. Yet, the weight of her vulnerabilities lingered. Her trust in humans had long since fractured, and she kept her distance from them. But even in her guarded state, she noticed small acts of kindness. A child tossing a piece of bread her way, or an elderly man leaving a bowl of water on a hot day. These rare gestures reminded her that not all humans were indifferent. Through it all, Luna's determination to protect her puppies was unyielding. Each day brought new challenges, a rival stray encroaching on her territory, the ever-present threat of predators, or the gnawing hunger that never truly left her. Yet she faced them all head-on, driven by an instinct stronger than fear, her maternal love. The puppies clung to Luna with unwavering trust, their small forms following her with wobbly steps whenever she ventured from the den. Each time she returned, their joy was palpable, their wagging tails and soft cries a reminder of her purpose. For the first time in years, Luna felt hope. These 4 lives were her family, and she would do anything to protect them. But as storm clouds gathered on the horizon, a deep unease began to creep into Luna's mind. The den, while hidden and secure from prying eyes, was dangerously close to the riverbank. The rising winds carried a faint scent of rain, and her instincts warned her of the looming danger. She had chosen the den carefully, believing it to be the safest place for her pups. Now she wasn't so sure. Luna's amber eyes shifted to her puppies as they tumbled over one another in a playful heap, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing above. Lowering herself to the ground, she nudged each one gently, as if committing their soft fur and tiny breaths to memory. They were her everything, and she would face any challenge to keep them safe. As the first cold drops of rain began to fall, Luna rose to her feet, her ears pricking forward and her body tensing with resolve. She glanced toward the village, then back at the swelling river, her mind calculating the safest path forward. Luna had survived storms before, both literal and metaphorical, but this time, the stakes were higher than ever. No matter what lay ahead, she would not fail her puppies. She would fight, endure, and do whatever it took to keep her family together. The storm struck with an unforgiving fury, catching the riverside village and its residents completely off guard. What began as a soft drizzle that morning had escalated into a relentless downpour, battering rooftops and turning dirt paths into treacherous streams of thick mud. The river, swollen from weeks of rain, now roared with life, its turbulent waters swallowing the low-lying banks and dragging debris in its wake. For Luna, the rising roar of the river was a dire warning, a signal she couldn't afford to ignore. All day, Luna had been restless, her sharp instincts alerting her to the danger before the skies had fully unleashed their wrath. She paced anxiously outside her den, scanning the horizon with wary eyes as distant thunder echoed across the hills. Her puppies, still too young to understand the impending peril, had curled together in the den, their soft whimpers barely audible above the drumming rain. Luna returned to them frequently, nuzzling their tiny bodies and licking their heads as if to comfort them. But in truth, she was trying to calm herself. As darkness fell, the situation turned dire. The river's currents surged with unprecedented ferocity, tearing away branches and climbing perilously close to the den's entrance. Luna felt the icy water pooling around her paws, the chill seeping into her bones. The den, once a sanctuary for her family, was rapidly becoming a death trap. Her sharp eyes darted between the river's edge and her fragile puppies. She couldn't wait any longer. The river would soon consume their shelter, and her puppies were too vulnerable to survive the flood. Letting out a low, urgent whine, Luna nosed her puppies awake. Groggy and trembling from the cold, they blinked up at her, unaware of the danger closing in. Luna moved swiftly, picking up the smallest puppy by the scruff of its neck and stepping into the storm. The rain pelted her fur, soaking her to the skin as she navigated the slippery ground. Each step was a battle, the mud clinging to her paws and the water lapping hungrily at her legs. But Luna pressed on, driven by a primal instinct to protect her family. The first trip to higher ground felt endless. The storm's howling wind tore through the trees and the rising water threatened to pull her under with every step. By the time she reached a small patch of dry land beneath a fallen tree, Luna's body was trembling from exertion. She gently placed the puppy in the shelter and turned back without hesitation, her heart pounding as she fought against exhaustion. The storm grew fiercer with every passing moment. The rain blinded her and the river's relentless current rose higher, making each journey back to the den more perilous than the last. One by one, she carried her puppies to safety, her muscles screaming for rest, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Yet she refused to stop. For Luna, failure was not an option. On her final trip, disaster struck. Carrying the last and smallest pup, Luna was caught off guard by a sudden surge of water. The powerful current slammed into her, knocking her off her feet and sweeping her downstream. Luna yelped, her claws scraping against the slippery riverbed as she struggled to regain control. The puppy clutched tightly in her jaws, squirmed and let out faint cries, their sound barely audible over the roaring flood. For a fleeting moment, fear gripped Luna's heart. The storm was too powerful, the current too strong. But as her puppies' cries reached her ears, something inside her ignited, a surge of unrelenting love and determination. Drawing on reserves of strength she didn't know she had, Luna kicked against the current, her claws finally finding purchase on a submerged rock. She heaved herself upward, pushing toward the safety of the riverbank. Exhausted but victorious, Luna dragged herself and her puppy onto solid ground. Collapsing onto the muddy earth, her body shook with fatigue, but her grip on the puppy remained firm. Gently, she placed the final pup with its siblings beneath the fallen tree, where they huddled together for warmth. Luna lay beside them, her body forming a shield against the storm's wrath. The rising floodwaters and unrelenting rain made it clear that this shelter was only temporary. Luna's sharp eyes scanned the chaotic landscape, searching for a true safe haven. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from resolve. The fight was far from over, and she was ready to face whatever came next to protect her family. The storm raged on with unrelenting fury, the torrential rain turning the world into a chaotic swirl of gray and brown. Sheets of water blurred the landscape, while the deafening roar of the river below filled the air. Luna crouched beneath a fallen tree, her soaked body forming a shield around her shivering puppies. Their tiny cries pierced through the storm's relentless noise, each sound a desperate reminder of the danger creeping closer. She had managed to save them from the collapsing den, but this refuge was only temporary. The rising floodwaters left her with little time to act. Her sharp eyes darted across the landscape, searching for safety. A nearby hillside offered the promise of higher ground, but the path to it was treacherous, a stretch of flooded terrain and fast-moving water. Luna's heart pounded as she assessed the obstacles. The muddy ground was unstable, the current unpredictable, and her body already trembled from exhaustion. Still, giving up was not an option. Her puppies depended on her, and she would endure whatever it took to ensure their survival. Letting out a determined huff, Luna nudged her puppies awake, encouraging them to stand. Their small legs wobbled beneath them, and they clung to her for stability. Gently, she lifted the smallest by the scruff of its neck, its light weight a fragile reminder of its vulnerability. With cautious steps, she ventured into the rising water, her claws digging into the muddy ground as she fought for balance. The icy current tugged at her legs, threatening to pull her under, but Luna pressed on, her ears pinned against her head, to block out the howling wind. Each step was a battle. The mud sucked at her paws and the rushing water lapped dangerously high against her legs. Behind her, the remaining 3 puppies whimpered under the tree, their cries urging her forward. Every muscle in her body burned as she pushed through the chaos, her breath coming in ragged bursts. When she finally reached the base of the hillside, she placed the first puppy on a dry patch of ground beneath some sheltering rocks and turned back without hesitation. The second trip was even harder. The river had risen higher, its freezing waters reaching her chest as she waded through the torrent. A sudden gust of wind sent a branch crashing into the water ahead, splashing her face and blinding her momentarily. Luna froze, her body trembling as fear crept into her mind. But the cries of her puppies pulled her focus back. With a low growl of resolve, she pushed forward, her legs moving mechanically against the pain and exhaustion. By the time she reached the third puppy, her vision blurred and her body felt as though it was moving on sheer instinct. Each step drained her, yet her determination never wavered. Luna carried the third and then the fourth puppy to the hillside, collapsing beside them as the rain continued to lash against her. For a brief moment she allowed herself to rest, curling her body protectively around her shivering litter. But the hillside offered only a fragile reprieve. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and the water continued to creep closer. Her moment of respite was cut short by a distant, ominous crack of thunder, followed by the splintering sound of a falling tree. Luna jumped to her feet as a surge of water rushed toward them, carrying debris that threatened to sweep everything away. Her body tense, she nudged her puppies forward, urging them to climb the hillside with her. The ascent was steep, the ground slick with rain-soaked mud, but it was their only chance. Luna climbed slowly, pausing often to push her puppies ahead with her nose. The mud crumbled beneath her paws, and the wind tore through her fur as if to push her back into the flood. Halfway up, disaster struck. Luna's paw slipped on a patch of slick mud, sending her tumbling backward. She let out a sharp yelp, her claws scrambling for purchase as she slid perilously close to the edge. Above her, her puppies cried out in alarm, their tiny forms clinging desperately to the hillside. With a final desperate effort, Luna hooked her claws onto an exposed root and pulled herself back up. Her body shook from exertion, but her resolve never faltered. She pressed onward, her puppies following closely, until they reached the summit. The hilltop was exposed to the full force of the storm, but it was far above the surging floodwaters. Luna collapsed onto the ground, curling around her puppies to shield them from the biting wind. As the relentless rain continued, Luna's body and spirit were pushed to their limits. Exhaustion weighed heavily on her, yet every cry, every nuzzle, and every small lick from her puppies reminded her why she couldn't stop. They were her reason to endure, her purpose in the chaos. For them, she would face anything. When the first light of dawn broke through the storm clouds, casting a golden glow over the battered landscape, Luna's determination burned brighter than ever. She had faced every challenge the storm had thrown at her, and though the fight was far from over, she was ready. This wasn't just about survival. It was about protecting her family, the only thing she had left in the world, and as long as she could stand, she would keep going. For her puppies, for her purpose, for the unyielding bond that tied them together. The storm reached its peak just as the first rays of dawn began piercing through the heavy clouds, casting an eerie glow over the devastation. Rain fell in unrelenting torrents, turning the hilltop into a muddy battlefield against nature's fury. The roaring floodwaters below inched ever closer, swallowing everything in their path. Luna stood at the edge of the hill, her soaked fur clinging to her trembling body, her muscles quivering with exhaustion. Behind her, her 4 puppies huddled together, their tiny bodies pressed against each other for warmth. Despite her fatigue, Luna's instinct screamed that her battle was far from over. A deafening crack of thunder ripped through the air, followed by the sharp, splintering sound of a tree snapping in the distance. Luna's ears perked, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon for danger. Then she saw it. A massive tree trunk carried by the raging floodwaters, hurtling toward the base of the hill. The force of its collision shook the ground violently, dislodging large chunks of soil and rock. Luna's heart pounded as she realized the hill beneath them was beginning to give way. Suddenly, one of the puppies let out a startled cry and began sliding toward the unstable edge. Luna acted without hesitation. Summoning every ounce of strength she had left, she lunged forward, gripping the puppy by the scruff of its neck, just as the ground beneath it crumbled into the rushing waters below. The roar of the flood was deafening, mere inches from her paws, as she scrambled back to safety with the puppy in her jaws. Her other 3 pups whimpered in fear, their wide eyes fixed on her. Luna's legs shook with the effort, but she refused to falter. The hill was no longer safe. The landslide had destabilized the slope, and the rising floodwaters threatened to consume it entirely. Luna's sharp eyes darted around, desperate for another way out. Through the sheets of rain, she spotted a faint trail winding higher into the trees, leading to sturdier ground. It was their only hope. With a low whine, Luna nudged her puppies to their feet. Their legs wobbled, but their trust in her was absolute. She herded them onto the narrow trail, positioning herself as a shield against the lashing rain and howling wind. The path was steep and treacherous, the mud slick beneath her paws, but Luna pressed forward, driven by her unyielding instinct to protect her family. Halfway up the trail, disaster struck again. A powerful gust of wind sent a branch crashing down from the trees above, landing just feet from the group. The sharp crack startled the puppies, and one darted into the underbrush, disappearing from sight. Luna froze, her heart racing. She barked, sharply, her voice cutting through the storm, but the puppy didn't return. Without a moment's hesitation, Luna bolted into the dense foliage, her muscles screaming in protest as she pushed through the thick, rain-soaked vegetation. The storm seemed to conspire against her. The underbrush was dense, the ground uneven, and the rain blurred her vision. Luna kept moving, her nose to the ground, following the faint, familiar scent of her pup. Finally, she found it, a tiny, shivering bundle huddled beneath a fallen log, its frightened eyes wide with fear. Relief coursed through Luna as she nuzzled the puppy gently, her presence a reassurance. She picked it up by the scruff and turned, back toward the trail, her resolve unshaken. Rejoining the others, Luna placed the puppy beside its siblings, her body sagging with exhaustion. The hilltop where they had once found refuge was now nearly submerged, the floodwaters rising relentlessly below. There was no turning back. Summoning every ounce of strength she had left, Luna led her family higher, the trail winding steeply, through the forest. The final stretch was the most harrowing. The mud clung to Luna's paws, and the rain had turned the trail into a near-vertical climb. She slipped multiple times, her body slamming into the ground, but each time, she rose, again her resolve unbroken. Her puppies, shivering but determined, followed her lead, their trust in her unwavering. At last, Luna reached the summit. The ground leveled out, and the dense trees offered some shelter from the storm's fury. Below, the floodwaters churned, violently, a sea of chaos that seemed almost surreal in the calm of the clearing. Luna collapsed onto the ground, her body trembling as she gasped for air. Her puppies curled against her, their small bodies warm and safe in her embrace. For the first time since the storm began, Luna allowed herself to rest. She had faced the unrelenting storm, the treacherous terrain, and the rising floodwaters, and she had won. Her puppies were safe, their tiny tails wagging as they snuggled, close to her. That was all that mattered. As the rain began to ease and the storm clouds broke apart, The first rays of sunlight bathed the forest in a golden glow. Luna lifted her head, her eyes scanning the horizon. She had survived the impossible not just for herself but for her family. And as she nuzzled her puppies once more, she knew that no storm, no flood, no challenge would ever break the bond they shared. The storm had passed, leaving behind an eerie stillness broken only by the soft rustle of leaves and the distant drip of water. The first rays of morning filtered through the trees, casting a golden glow over the rain-soaked landscape. The once ferocious floodwaters had receded, revealing the aftermath of their rampage. Fallen trees, washed out trails, and scattered debris, the remnants of nature's wrath. At the summit of the hill, safely sheltered by the forest, Luna lay with her 4 puppies, nestled close to her, their small bodies radiating warmth. Luna's body ached with exhaustion. Her legs were scraped, her fur matted with mud, and her breaths came in shallow, uneven gasps. Yet despite the toll the ordeal had taken on her, a deep sense of peace settled in her chest. She had done it. Against all odds, she had kept her family together. Her puppies, now nuzzled against her side, were safe. Their soft whimpers and rhythmic breathing were a reminder of her unrelenting determination. As the sun's warmth began to replace the storm's chill, the puppies stirred, their tiny bodies stretched, their tails wagging faintly as they blinked up at their mother. Luna nuzzled each one gently, her tongue sweeping over their muddy coats to clean them. Their sleepy licks in return were a testament to their trust and love for her. She watched them with a mix of relief and pride, their innocence a stark contrast to the chaos they had just survived. In the distance, the quiet was broken by the faint sounds of life returning to the village. Luna's ears twitched toward the echoes of voices, tools clattering, and livestock stirring. The villagers were beginning the arduous task of rebuilding. Luna's instincts urged caution. The world of humans had been unpredictable and often unkind, but her sharp eyes softened as she recognized a familiar figure approaching the hill. It was a young boy, no more than 10 years old. Luna had seen him before in the village, a kind presence who occasionally left scraps of food near the market where she scavenged. His wide eyes scanned the clearing, and when they landed on Luna and her puppies, his face lit up with a mixture of surprise and concern. The boy approached slowly, each step deliberate and unthreatening. Luna stiffened, her body positioning itself protectively between the boy and her puppies. But the boy stopped at a respectful distance and crouched low, his hands open in a gesture of peace. He spoke softly, his voice kind and reassuring, the storm's rage now replaced by his quiet compassion. Luna's sharp instincts weighed the situation carefully. Hunger gnawed at her, but her protective nature kept her rooted. After a moment, the boy reached into his pocket and set a piece of bread on the ground before retreating. He sat cross-legged a few feet away, waiting patiently. Slowly, Luna rose, her movements cautious but deliberate. She sniffed the offering, then picked it up and retreated to her puppies, sharing the small meal with them. The boy didn't move, respecting the distance between them. He simply watched, his expression filled with admiration for Luna's bravery and determination. For Luna, this moment was something new. In the wake of abandonment, survival, and hardship, she saw in the boy's eyes something she hadn't encountered in a long time: compassion. As the sun climbed higher, the boy stood and made his way back down the trail, pausing to glance back at Luna one last time before disappearing into the trees. Luna's ears flicked at the fading sound of his footsteps. She turned back to her puppies, now dozing contentedly in the sunlight. For the first time in what felt like forever, Luna allowed herself to fully relax. They were safe, and perhaps the world was not as cruel as she had once believed. In the days that followed, Luna and her puppies stayed on the hilltop, exploring their new surroundings and regaining their strength. The forest became their sanctuary, a haven untouched by the storm's fury. The boy returned periodically, leaving small offerings of food and water at the clearing's edge, careful not to intrude. Slowly, a delicate trust began to form. With each passing day, Luna felt her spirit grow stronger. The storm had tested her in unimaginable ways, but it had also revealed her unyielding resilience. She had faced the fury of nature and emerged, not just as a survivor but as a protector, a mother, and a symbol of unconditional love. As the sun set on another tranquil evening, Luna curled around her puppies, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. The sky was painted in hues of orange and purple, a breathtaking reminder of the beauty that could follow even the darkest storms. Her journey had been fraught with pain and hardship, but it had also revealed the depths of her strength. In the peaceful quiet of the hilltop surrounded by her family, Luna knew she had found something greater than survival. She had found hope. As Luna and her puppy's incredible journey comes to an end, we are left with a powerful reminder of the resilience, courage, and unconditional love that animals bring into our lives. Luna's story is a testament to the strength found in even the most vulnerable, inspiring us all to look at the world with more compassion and empathy. Her unwavering determination to protect her family shows us the true meaning of love and courage. If Luna's story moved you, consider making a difference in the lives of animals in need. You can help by adopting a pet, supporting local animal shelters, volunteering your time, or simply spreading awareness about the importance of animal welfare. Every action, no matter how small, makes an impact. Together, we can create a kinder world where no animal is left behind, and every life is cherished. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to Untold Wild Tales for more inspiring animal stories. By subscribing, you'll never miss a story that celebrates the extraordinary bonds between humans and animals. Share this video with someone who loves animals as much as you do, and let's inspire change one heartfelt tale at a time.